Welcome to Classic Movie Salon.
It's almost a frozen snap.
This is episode 100. I'm hanging out with Matthew and Colleen and Tachi. We're eventually going to talk about Casablanca. But oh, nice! Look at that! We have a set. That is fancy.
I love
nice.
that.
I will be taking a screen grab of that. That is
I forgot. Here, I gotta prop it up.
That is
now it looks like 10.
So rad.
We've done 10 shows. I had gold made for it.
That is so cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Dynamite.
Why do you have 100 laying around?
Well, don't that I could act like it's specially for
I know,
us.
But right.
But remember, in 2013, Delta turned 100. So
Yes.
So I happened to be walking by. I said, "Wait a minute, I have a 100."
Going through the prop closet. What do I have for 100? Anything?
And it's environmentally friendly because it's recycled. So that's even better.
Exactly.
If I threw it away, it wouldn't be friendly. But hey,
wait for the next 100. Wait for the next 100.
Exactly.
So before the show started, we were talking about film festivals. Colleen's working on a couple, including the Athena Film Festival and Tribeca, and we were talking about VR. Malia Probst, if you don't follow her, Probst, also VR Scout. She goes to all the stuff, follows all the stuff. She's kind of like a VR. I don't know. It's almost like she doesn't make VR. She kind of,
but she knows VR.
She talks to everybody in VR. She goes everywhere. She
finger on the pulse.
Yeah, and she has for now going on 3 years, I believe, which in VR is kind of a long time, at least at this round. Yeah. But she was posting stuff about the Frankenstein, as I've been corrected, VR project that was at the Sundance Film Festival that included live performers and a bunch of other things. And I tweeted her that sounded expensive. And then we were talking about whether Sundance was the first film festival, which we're believing, correct us if we're wrong, is the first one that started playing with VR.
The only thing I'd be guessing possibly besides Sundance would be something horror, because that's such an amazing genre for the VR experience, and that's what we had. That was pretty much. I think we had about 6 films at New York Film Festival, and the best one. I mean, they were all pretty much all horror with the haptic seats, and so you're in it. I mean, in it, but then they've got physical sense. So I mean, horror is just the genre, and really expensive, because the chair, they were telling us how much the chair costs, and it's just so. Yeah,
all the stuff's a little too expensive now, and I think that I went to a VR Scout not this past October, the year before, for a Halloween party that they put on, and it was nothing but horror stuff. Well, mostly horror stuff. There were a few things that weren't. But it was like, they had a closet, and a woman was dressed up like a nurse, and you had to sit in a wheelchair, and they'd put the VR thing on you, and I'm like, I'm not going to wait online for that one. I'm not waiting online. And I think that's the thing with VR. Like, you have to wait online, and it's so antithetical to technology and society. It's like, come on, let's go.
Well,
but in that circumstance, why have the VR? Because I've been to horror mazes, escape room type things, which are completely immersive. I don't see what VR can add to that.
Well, the experience is otherworld. I mean, it's just another level.
Well, they need to. I don't know why they haven't, last year when I was at NAB, they had the group VR experience where like 17 people were in a 60-foot dome, and you were able to experience VR at the same time. And so, that's really what they need to start to develop for it to be a more, first without the headset, but an experience that is less solitary. The fun of it is not, not just being by yourself, but being able to experience these amazing things with other people.
I agree. And I'd seen Malia had at that VR Scout Halloween party, they had the company that does that dome thing, but they had a little one where you could fit like 8 people like sitting on the floor. But it was that same thing, like that. I think because movies, in terms of an attractive, economical, communal experience, is really crappy, and the idea of VR in that situation, because you can like go look, and you can't really do that in VR unless someone else is in there, and you also have the ability to share it on social, which is the other difficulty with VR, is that like I did Google Tilt Brush, where you're drawing
Yeah.
and it's amazing and three-dimensional, and you can make the drawing 35 feet tall and then bring it down to a little bit, but I couldn't show anybody.
Nobody can see it. Yeah.
It makes it a solitary experience that is too bad you can't share it. It's like, look at what I'm drawing, and you just.
But I think that is the next wave, is VR social, is people. I saw something fly by where you would essentially sit in a virtual living room with other people in other locations and watch like a football game together or something like that.
The only thing is interesting though is the reaction in a group setting, because as it's happening, I guess you have to write that into the script though, because the reaction still is so like, oh wow, and you'd have to have the participation, obviously it's all
I kind of feel like it's its own thing, and it's still crazy early. There's a ton of money being thrown at it, and prices have come down for some of the headsets.
For the headsets,
other things have come out. Other companies are starting like new platforms, but I have just kept an eye on it, and honestly, even with 360, it doesn't seem cost effective right now for me as an indie person to start shooting in 360. I feel like it's a play. I feel like I'm starting to think like theater.
Not in terms of what you can present to an audience. Unless they have a headset, and they have to be seated and be, you've got to send them. It's really specific.
And not only theater in the round, because you have to remember that the camera is in the middle, and whatever at some point you're going to, it may be able to be seen because you're able to tilt the camera, etc. So you have to take all of that into account when you write your story. So there's a higher level of storytelling awareness, not storytelling, but storytelling awareness that you need when you're talking about VR and 360.
I agree.
Because the camera is 45-degree field of view on the camera, isn't it?
Well, on the 360s, it's 360.
No, but that's the point I'm making. On an ordinary film camera, typically you've got a 45-degree field of view.
Right.
So there's 315 degrees that aren't normally covered.
Right.
How do you build the sets? How do you actually run it? How do you have the director there? And this kind of stuff. Just impractical.
Well, I think that it's definitely got a lot of challenges. Editing being one of them, and also you can't. Not necessarily you can't. It is really difficult to edit VR, 360, whatever you want to call it. You can do it. You can jump cut in it. The viewer has to then reacclimate to wherever they are, and also you have to, as a storyteller, direct their attention to where you would like them to look, and that's either done with light or sound, and or an arrow saying go look over there, but other than that, it's and I think that's the other part of it, is like you can't see it all, and that is part of the attraction.
There was an interesting one. There's some directors and filmmakers working the 360 camera actually into the story itself, so it's kind of utilizing more than one camera, and it's so it's evolving. It's fascinating.
It's really cool to see what's happening, see how it changes storytelling, and the movie that we're talking about today was shot completely in virtual reality. No, that'd be so cool. Casablanca.
One scene was, wasn't it, with the aeroplane?
I got pickpocketed.
Yeah, right. I had a poster of this movie on my wall when I was in high school. I don't know how many times I've seen this thing. It's it is not a perfect movie, but especially.
Oh, I think so.
Well, especially on a rewatch, it never fail. I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm like, oh yeah, Paris, here we go. And I'm not, I think because there are so many characters in it, and in reading about it this time, in looking at all of the stories of the actors in it, uncredited actors in it, how many people had experience with all of the subject matter, how many of them were really immigrants and refugees and knew about all this, and because so many of them were uncredited and were
but you knew them camera, you knew who they were,
but the idea was that the reason that Casablanca feels the way it does is that was not central casting. That just wasn't a bunch of extras that they showed in there, and I think that's why it doesn't feel like what it was originally written as, is a play.
It's authentic. It feels real. You believe every bit of it. I mean, it's sets, it's costumes. Ingrid's wearing that pin that had to be from Harry Winston or Cartier or whatever it was. It's like, no, it's just a freedom fighter's wife is not wearing jewelry like that. But who cares? It's just,
and that hat, the fashion hat.
Yeah,
but that hat, I'm like.
Hello.
Where can I find that hat, and where can I wear it to?
I was doing the opposite. I was like, wait a minute, you're traveling with a box big enough to hold just that hat? That's a lot of hat box for that hat.
Don't care. Don't need to know. Don't want to know.
Get that thing on a train. Because if she has two hats, you need like another giant box to throw that in.
It shows the care.
The box that you've used to code the hats, you unfold and make into the aeroplane. So it works.
That is true, and that is the other part of in reading this, that the plane is cardboard. Plane's cardboard, and
doesn't matter.
And also, the weird thing is, when I Googled Casablanca today, it showed me 2 screening times that are happening.
It's always somewhere on all the time now.
So when is your? Mine's February 6th at 2 theaters. What do you know?
Mine is February 6th down in Coconut Grove. They must be doing. Is that the actual anniversary? February 6th?
I don't know.
It's the 75th year this year, so it's going to be So this happened 5 years ago when it was the 70th, but I think now it's just in constant rotation, because you've seen the script has been it's the #1 script of all time for the WGA. And I mean, it's everything list, and so
what's interesting is one of the theaters that came up, I clicked on it just to figure out where do I have to drive if I want to go to see this, and it's very close to Van Nuys Airport where they shot the last scene. I'm like, that's got to be as close as you can get to a Casablanca location and see it on the screen. Gotta be
kind of fitting.
That'd be really
that is amazing,
wouldn't they?
So I hope somebody points it out before the movie starts. That's have an usher or somebody come out and introduce the film and explain that, hey, after you're done, drive over to location. See that? Great.
Wow, that's amazing.
So have you guys seen this thing a million times?
I own it.
Yes.
All right. So there's not going to be any first time. I've been putting it off. I finally watched this one. I did hear from one of my Snapchat pals who hasn't seen it, and I explained to her, and I think this is the other part of watching the film now at this point in history, with everything that is going on with immigrants and refugees and trying to get from one country to another, and fascism and jackasses and graft, and it's so contemporary. It is so on the money. It's so happening around the corner. It is, and I think that makes it so much more relevant, and because it's so accessible. And that was the other thing I tripped over, is that this thing's on more best lists because Citizen Kane is considered by many to be the better film, but it's way less accessible. It's less accessible, I think, to a larger audience. Citizen Kane it's a hard watch for a lot of people.
It is. They're different. They're just different. They're different.
Well, there's no romance. There's no, you're not rooting for anybody. You're kind of deconstructing what has already happened and finding out who this person is, and it's a completely different kind of story. It doesn't.
Well, Kane focuses on just Kane, and with Casablanca, it's everyone. Everyone's got some sort of thing going on at Rick's, and the war touches everybody. It truly does. So,
and I think Kane is also very narcissistic, and I think, well, especially in this day,
also making it relevant.
A little bit, yeah.
And also, Citizen Kane, he was a big man and he was out of shape.
That is true.
That's true. That's very true. Sometimes, not
many people know that.
Say again.
And not many people know that.
It's true.
True. I think the thing with Citizen Kane also versus this is that there's a level of that Citizen Kane is chock full of symbolism, and you kind of almost have to deconstruct that to start to begin to understand the film. And it starts with this whole rosebud nonsense. So throughout the entire film, you're looking for the meaning of this and the meaning of that, and how does the fact that the relationship with his parents is not good, how does that figure? So it's such an ethereal viewing experience. Whereas Casablanca, you can just be, and I think sometimes people just want to be. That's a major difference.
No,
they don't pull any punches.
Colleen, your mic's rubbing on something. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
That's why.
Yeah, I got a new headset, and I was trying. Anyway, I had to go back to this one. And anywho, I've got
just your hair is on the mic.
No, it's my shirt, or both.
Yeah, it's that little white thing that you're right there.
No, I know. Oh, no, sorry.
No. I just like every time you moved, I was hearing scratching.
Well, I'll put it. I wanted it. Yeah. Sorry. It's easier this way. Apologies.
No worries. Matthew, historically, this was, I guess the movie was before World War II. That was the idea. I mean, before Pearl Harbor, rather.
Well, that's the genius thing about this movie. They started making the movie before the North African landings of the same name. And so they managed to bring it out at the perfect moment. I mean, that just doesn't happen, making a movie for an event that hasn't happened yet. So World War II starts, obviously, with the invasion of Poland. Britain gets involved. America doesn't turn up till later, till Pearl Harbor. But this movie set just before Pearl Harbor, but happens to come out just at the time Britain and America are doing a joint invasion of North Africa, including Casablanca, which is absolute genius. And it was an incredible propaganda piece because, as you said right at the start, it involved people who really had fled from the Nazis and were playing with such passion and had such reality. So not only is it great performances, it's great timing at a crucial moment in the war when the tide was turning. And remember, this isn't made at the end of the war. This is made at the height of the war.
Right.
But at the moment, at the precise moment when you're just starting to get a feeling that the tide is turning. Because up until then, Pearl Harbor had happened and the Japanese had swept across the Pacific. So, oh my goodness me, Hawaii's going to get invaded, Alaska's going to get invaded, America's going to get invaded. And we're thinking, well, we're being kicked out of France. We're losing in North Africa. But just at the moment this movie comes and the tide is turned, the Germans get swept out of North Africa very, very quickly. And then they go, right, okay, we can get into Italy, then we can get up into France and we can win this war. And it's just at that turning of the tide, just like in Lord of the Rings, we meet again at the turning of the tide. And that's why, amongst other things, it had such a powerful effect on people.
Wow, very cool. And when I was reading the info on the release date, Wikipedia, but it's cited. Although initial release was anticipated in early 1943, the film premiered at the Hollywood Theater in New York City on November 26, 1942, to coincide with the Allied invasion of North Africa and the capture of Casablanca. It went into general release on January 23, 1943, to take advantage of the Casablanca Conference, a high-level meeting in the city, New York, between Churchill and Roosevelt.
FDR, yeah.
How crazy is that? They changed the title.
For that. Give the context of Casablanca itself. So in 1940, France was invaded and quite quickly overrun, largely because the French didn't put up much of a fight, and everybody else did. And so the Germans took over the northern part of France, and the French government, as it was, fell and was replaced with a government which came to an agreement with the Germans that we'll quit the war and we'll just be neutral. And so the French colonies, North Africa, West Africa, elsewhere, were in a bit of a problem, that they then were colonies of a government which was a complicit partner with the Nazis. Some of the colonies in West Africa quickly went over to the Free French side, but North Africa, because it was near the south of France, remained on the side of the French government, the Vichy government. And the people had a very, very uncomfortable time because they're on the side of people they despise, but at the same time, they don't want to be on the side of the Allies, because when France fell, Britain had to do something, a very awful act. They had to sink the French Navy to stop the Germans getting it. Wow. It's a bit of work. Yeah, people aren't aware of that.
I never heard of that.
Fighting alongside France. And then all of a sudden, they had to say to France, like, you've got to get your Navy out to us to stop the Germans getting it. And if you don't, we'll sink it. But because the French government had a new treaty with Germany, they didn't do it. And so Britain had to attack the French Navy and destroyed it in one go, killing lots of French people. And so lots of the French there were anti-British. They hated the Germans, they hated the British. And they were just locked in this sort of pit of anger and bitterness and despair. There was no hope of getting France back. That they didn't have the forces to keep the Germans out. They didn't have any friends. And North Africa was a bit further from France. There was just that little bit of freedom. It was part of France legally, so if you were French, you could get over to North Africa and just be that bit further away from the Germans. And that's why there's a bit more of a free and easy atmosphere. But the emotion of it all, of course, is written in the cast faces in the amazing Marseillaise scene, where, because they're not acting, that's real.
Yeah, I mean even the gentleman who played the waiter, I can't remember the name of the actor, but his sisters died in a concentration camp.
Oh, S.Z. Sakal.
Yes.
He's Hungarian. Yeah.
Cuddles,
they call. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for him to be that person who has that history, play that role in this story, is, all of the method crap you can talk about, there's just no way to have that because he never plays the emotion. He doesn't have a heartstring line in the movie. He's kind of a lighter character, and he kind of makes everybody sort of smile, and to have this horrible thing happen, and for him to pull that performance off under those circumstances, again, I think it's sort of like having a human being inside the R2-D2 robot changes how actors respond to that robot. And I think that there's just some kind of magic that because that thing was shot in Burbank. So Burbank, California. So nowhere near any of this. Everybody at the end of the day walked out. It was 80 degrees. It was beautiful. And then the next day they went back to Casablanca.
But it was full of refugees from Europe because everyone had to leave. Right. And everyone played their own nationality. And it was legit. I mean, it was. So
we didn't have any "I'm Spartacus" moments. Everybody was real.
Yep.
And look at Major Strasser in every other war film. See, Germans, they play, they film German accents. We have ways of making you talk. The war for you is over. Except, like being a real German, didn't do that at all. And it's the best performance of a German officer in any movie.
You're right. And because he is, and I don't know why, well, not everybody, and granted I haven't seen a billion war films, but it seems like actors playing Nazis enjoy the evil part a little more.
Well, they say he loved it particularly because his wife was Jewish and they did escape, and he deliberately chose roles that made Nazis look obviously awful, so all these, I don't know, how many languages are spoken in the film, and what's wonderful too for me I like it. No translation. It's either you get it or you don't. It's because that happens all the time. The helplessness, the frustration, and people like, huh, what? It just, do you sink or swim? Do it or not? So it's sort of this melange, of being where everybody needs something, has to get on and do the best you can. So it's what it's getting that authenticity, that genuine feeling.
Yeah.
In LA, or wherever you find yourself in the world, which can truly be anywhere, depending on the situation. Sometimes, so.
I don't know when it was the in context. So we're thinking at the time all the blackface and yellowface that was going on at the time, and yet there was a film made right in the heart of blackface territory. Everything was done for real, and it was so much better for it.
And also that there was a real relationship between Sam and Rick, that it was a real, that they had a friendship, that, when he was bad, it's like, let's go get drunk and let's leave here, and wasn't, not that it was the greatest role, but it's so pivotal, and and also not a piano player.
Right, he was a drummer.
Yeah, I saw that. I never knew that. That was one thing that flew by me, and not that I think that anyone's singing or playing any instrument in a movie, because often they're not. But and apparently that was another thing that happened, was that the gentleman who scored it, Max Steiner, wrote the music. He didn't like As Time Goes By, and wanted to replace it. So they were going to reshoot all of that just to replace the song, but she cut her hair.
Too late. Yep.
For another movie, and they couldn't do it. Can you imagine?
I can't. And I mean, that kind of brings me to the point of this, those like 6 lines from the AFI film list. This movie has become characterized in terms of these few lines in popular culture, and it's difficult to watch. Again, this has been the first time in a while that I've seen. I think several years that I've seen it. Mm-hmm. And so you really, when I was watching it again, I watched it like 2 weeks ago, I'm like, wow, the lines may have just glossed over you when you watch it originally or whatever, but then when you see it, you're like, wow, you see where everything popular culture wise that had used these lines I was thinking of. So when play it for old time's sake, or play it again, Sam, as time goes by, the first thing I started thinking about was 2 things. First, the British comedy As Time Goes By was Dame Judi Dench, and I can't remember the actor. I can't remember his name.
Jeffrey Palmer.
Yes.
Great show.
So, love that show. That was the first thing. The second thing is the skit that they did on In Living Color, where they had Stevie Wonder singing.
Who is not going to recognize Ilsa walking in?
No, exactly.
just That's horrible.
So it just goes to show how iconic these things are and how much it is seeped into popular culture. It is such a part of everything that you can probably go through so many different movies and so many different shows and find some part of Casablanca in there, whether it's a character, whether it's a line. It's almost ubiquitous. So you almost have to thank this movie for what it's done for popular culture.
Yeah. And also the most contemporary reference, and to my Snapchat pal who hadn't seen it, this was part of the reason, like, you got to watch it, because 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was watching regular news, and they were talking about, this is Year of the Indictment. There's lots coming.
I didn't know that was on the Chinese New Year calendar.
Yes,
but I guess
Year of the Indictment. Please enjoy the ride. A lot of us have been waiting a long time for this. And there's a come up in salad, but regardless, the line that was quoted was I can't believe there's a gambling going on here, and that was said by an anchor, discussing all this Russia stuff, because it's just so, at this point, it's just so ridiculous that the number of people and the number of meetings and the number of lies and the number of misstatements, and Kushner still doesn't have a security clearance, and it's been a year and change, and he should be in the
Wait, what?
Yeah, he doesn't have a security clearance. Swear to God.
And he's going to Israel with it.
Yeah, he can't look at the presidential daily briefing because he doesn't have a clearance for it. So they're trying to find out if he's getting it anyway, and if he is, he shouldn't be. But regardless,
anyway,
of course, but it is so apropos because it just and for him to be handed his winnings immediately after saying that is the funniest moment in this entire film, I think, because it is so, he is exactly who he is. He knows the BS he has to do to run this, to deal with this situation, and he's still, and he knows he's just going through it, and that is, and the other thing that in reading this, the last line, "This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship," was not in it, and they brought her back to dub it, which is kind of amazing, because whatever the ending, if that line wasn't there and it was just a fade out and a pullback of them walking into fog with no dialogue.
There's a lot of great stories with last lines. Another one is Some Like It Hot with Billy Wilder's movie, where it's, no one's perfect at the end, when he says, I'm a man. And it's just, just the way they didn't have an ending for that either. And so some of these things, I guess, they're just, and I don't think anyone knew it was, apparently all the actors thought it was like a movie, and they were all kind of, blah, blah, blah. No one knows. And yet it turns out to be one of the, the best, and they struggle with, how do you end this thing? I don't know. Can you think of any other way to finish it? Where they're both like.
Well, I think it's hard when you see it's like on Center Cage Match, we did cover songs, and I think it's really hard for people to like another version of the song when they've seen the first one. So since we only know, this ending, it's hard to imagine another one. But I can imagine how this would have worked as a play, because that's what it was. It was never produced. I mean, it was not produced as a play when the rights were bought as a film. But what a set, it's pretty much like, you would have the cafe, you'd have Rick's office. And
no, it was just the cafe.
I'm sorry?
It was one set. The play was just one set. It was just the cafe.
Right, but what I'm saying in terms of if they were to include all the side stuff with the office and having characters not see each other and that kind of thing, it would be easy to pull off. But that's all that would be needed. And really so much of the story, if you follow it, it's like the set that's outside on the street, which apparently was from another movie that they used because it was set up, and the cafe, and then the Paris stuff, which is pretty much just a bunch of really crappy rear projection.
But you know what? I think for the average person watching it, it has that, it is a crappy rear projection, but it feels Parisian.
It's Parisian crappy review projection.
I think the viewer may be able to forgive because of the romanticism of the film, and that whole, especially that will always have Paris, and that just kind of romanticizes it, even though it is crappy rear projection. So
I think, and at that point that they bring in the flashback, you're kind of so into the story that it's like, wherever they are, what's going on, how'd they meet, what happened, who did it, kind of doesn't matter. Wherever they are, in some little over the shop kind of loft, and don't care, and then he's leaning out a window listening to German and da-da-da-da-da, whatever. It kind of becomes, so the dialogue is so engaging, and she is gorgeous, and he's kind of whatever, who is he, where did he come from, what do you do, we don't know, so you're sort of so drawn in, and it's sort of like, that one kind of looks more like an Italian restaurant to me, like from Little Italy, than a French cafe, truthfully. But it's sort of, it's just
but
like,
I think that kind of the idea of it being a play. Again, I saw the movie Sideways was turned into a play, which I had seen. And it had car scenes in it. And so he just had two actors sitting side by side, and one's doing this, and they have a little sound effect going, and the stage was, you know, the audience was on two sides. It was a tiny little stage, and they made the set changes a dance and had people do stuff to have it on because they had to do it. But that's what I feel like with those scenes. And again, like Tachi said, for somebody who's watching it, like, it's kind of, you know, it's black and white. Everyone's dead. You know, this has nothing to do with contemporary society. You're already in such a, you know, especially if you're someone who, you know, was not anywhere near around when even some of this technology was still in play, like rotary phones, and you know, this would seem like kind of a fantasy world anyway. And
yeah,
I feel like the rear view projection kind of like, man.
But everyone, almost everyone, yeah, and almost everyone, you know, what gets you too is that feeling that almost everyone kind of has someone that's sort of like, yeah, I remember that time, you know, I went there and I met someone, and you know, it just, so
the
you
one
go,
that got away.
well, yeah,
or the one that ran away.
Or they ran, or they, you know, that fling I had, and I thought it was love, and it's sort of. I don't know.
And I sold equipment to get money to rent an apartment, and then she changed her mind, didn't move in.
Exactly. That
I got one of those.
Yeah.
That is mine. That is literally mine.
Or I was in a restaurant in Rome, and I was having dinner, and you know, it's, yeah.
Yeah, it was more like I lived in a one-bedroom apartment that I couldn't afford that was gigantic for 14 months because I signed the lease. But
and there's a pawn shop down the street. So.
Yeah.
Wait, in LA?
No, it was in Boston.
Oh, in Boston.
It's an expensive city, you know. So do what you gotta do.
And I was working as a bar back in a hotel. So. And that was a great thing, is that, you know, working in those bars, we had mob regulars, and a lot of them were doing business at the bar, and it's kind of, you know, reminds me of Rick's. You know, there was that one sweeping shot that is no dialogue, you know, no consistent dialogue, but it's just like scam, 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 graft, graft, graft. It is beautiful. That is such a great way to, like, you don't even know, you're done. You know, I mean, you got the voiceover at the beginning and all the rest of it, but that visual boom, 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 graft, you know exactly where you are, and it never changes. Like, everybody is who, and it seems like the game between Renault's character and Rick is that they are somewhere inside, there is like a molecule of good in them, and they each recognize it, but neither of them ever use it until the absolute end. That it seems like they're both, the archetypes of both of those guys are similar in that they're both stuck in a way. Rick's a little more stuck than I think Renault is, but Renault is stuck in a different way, and maybe even more stuck.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's true, and or they're just doing, you know, that, and it's like you said, Joe, with selling equipment and to have to pay them. It's also that you do what you have to do sometimes, and they're both in this situation of kind of, you know, doing
covering up a murder.
Do what you got. They're doing what they have to do in making the best of a crappy situation.
Hey, not a big deal.
Is it? It isn't really. You know, you're making calls along the way, and inside every. Suspects. And I mean, and that's just the best. That is the best thing of all, because a car of police pull up. There's a dead guy on the floor. There's two people standing in front of you, and you say, go look for some people that killed this guy. Who's around? There's no one else around. It just, you know, that works. It's perfect. It's like Rick looking up at the casino. You know, there's someone at the door who can come in, who can't come in, and somebody would say, well, how does he know who's you know who can come in, who can't come into the casino?
Well, you know, living in if you've ever gone, I remember going to a club, and there is a line. And there was an advantage to being tall, because it helps you get picked.
There's an advantage, yeah.
And also an advantage if you have a friend who lives in New York and knows everybody is a doorman. Also, that also helps. But there's people who sit out there for like 2 hours and they never get in. And they're not going to, because the doorman is just like, no, we are creating an environment and you are not part of it. Because it's 1985 and I've done a tremendous amount of cocaine. So I have room. I do. Next.
Exactly.
New York, 86. Doorman.
That's very New York. Yeah.
That was it. And that is the weird thing about getting picked and not getting picked. And for Rick to know, like he's and the guy who played the doorman, I guess, is another uncredited role. He ended up playing opposite Bogart in like Key Largo and something else. That was it. Like go to the Wikipedia page for Casablanca. It's one of the most, I think it's the most in-depth movie Wikipedia page.
Well, it is the most comprehensive Wikipedia page ever.
It's all annotated. It's, you know, there's no BS in it. But it is read the section on uncredited actors. Just that quick, like who they are, what their background is. That was the thing that I'm like, oh, now I look at this cast differently. Now I see why this moment in time, this story shot in Burbank does not feel like you are anywhere near Burbank.
Yeah.
Like if anything, you're on a soundstage in London. Like at least it doesn't even feel American.
No.
Well, you know what? Apparently, you know, according to this page, there were not very many American actors in it anyway.
Yeah, there's like three.
Bogart, Julie Wilson, and I think Sydney Greenstreet. Yeah, Julie Wilson is Sam, and I think Sydney Greenstreet. They were the only other Americans. Everyone else was European. Which is
if this is your first time watching classic movie Salon, we never get into all the hardcore credits and all that because that's what Wikipedia is for. We just
we should mention Michael Curtiz as the director, I guess, because he you know. Apparently. And it won best. It did, since Oscar time is upon us. The nomination was Best Picture, Best Writer.
Yeah, one Best Picture.
And Best Director.
Best Director.
Best Director for Curtiz, who I think Michael Curtiz. This is weird. Ended up like in the 70s directing Love Boat, which is just why. Yeah. Yeah,
you gotta pay the bills. You gotta pay the bills. You want to keep that Directors Guild insurance coming. You gotta book.
Yeah, it's
damn Skippy.
Yeah, you did, contracts and weird in the system, and there was no participation. There weren't, residuals. You didn't.
It's a different world.
You cannot be on your laurels when it comes to the industry. If you want to remain in the industry, you won't eat. So it's like, it feels like.
Well, you can. You just have to eat a lot less and cheaper, and then you can.
Yeah.
With entertainment success is that the overhead goes up fast, and then when the job stops, I had a landlady who, her husband died, and he was an arranger, so there was no residuals coming in for anything because there were never any arrangements. There's no way to do it for arrangements, and there never had been. And he tried. Peter Matz, he tried for years, and she was stuck with a giant house, and was that's why I ended up renting it, because she was trying to pay the mortgage. House in the hills.
Well, the other thing
too is chimpanzee.
Yeah, it was so. Honestly, there was a lot of parallels.
Really, to Sunset Boulevard?
Gloria Swanson. No, the Gloria Swanson thing. Lots of parallels, but and in the ground pool that I looked at as I typed. I'm like,
she never went swimming, just in case.
No, but she was a big time cabaret singer in New York, and a lot of stories.
Wow. Yeah.
She had a little like grand piano and a PA system set up with a mic stand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I had dinner down there one time, and she brought over another friend of hers who was a singer who I looked up on YouTube and found her singing in front of a giant orchestra in the 30s. And she was like 90 something. And Ray Charles, not the Ray Charles, the other Ray Charles, who sang the Three's Company theme. That was one dinner. Just the three of them, one guy that she had to play piano. And it was the weird thing, and talk about tangent. Weird thing was that the guy playing piano, everybody's in their 80s and 90s. Guy playing piano is like 84. And he played the piano, and And when he left, Marilyn came back in, and she had MS, so she's on a walker, but she, dressed to the nines on a walker. And she said that he asked why Peter Matz never hired him. And like, that was like years ago. And he's still wondering why. It was such a kind of like entertainment tragedy, kind of like, oh, like he's still bugged that he didn't get hired. Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting. It was weird. It was like living in a documentary for 4 years.
Joe Wilson, in my next life, I want to be you. I want to come back as you.
I don't even want to do that. The other thing that jumped out at me in Casablanca was the whole ring, the whole showing the Cross of Lorraine.
Right? Yeah.
That was such a cool little. Everybody's watching everybody, and everybody knows who he is, but just the way that everyone knows, when to change the subject when somebody gets close, and so cool. All those scenes were just so fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And again, reading the Wikipedia page, the couple who started writing the story were in France and had an experience that was very parallel to this, and saw the Rick archetype, and there was a description that somebody pulled up on Wikipedia that was pretty much the place, and it was a 2,000 seat nightclub.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge place for a club. That's a huge place.
Mm-hmm.
Like at that, tables and
Mm-hmm.
I've been in a place like that in Macau, China, and it's vast.
Wow, that's cool.
Mm.
Yeah, there was a casino like that in Macau, an older one.
Yeah.
That Lisboa place. I don't know if it's still there. It had this age sort of look with velvet chairs, and I don't know. It was.
Yeah, it said.
I hadn't thought of that.
Marie Burnett and his wife in 1938 visited Vienna shortly after the Anschluss. And were affected by the anti-Semitism they saw. In the south of France, they went to a nightclub that had multinational clientele, among them many exiles and refugees, and the prototype of Sam. In The Guardian, Paul Fairclough writes that Cinema Vox in Tangier was Africa's biggest when it opened in 1935 with 2,000 seats and a retractable roof. As Tangier was in Spanish territory, the theater's wartime bar heaped with spies, refugees, and underworld hoods, securing its place in cinematic history as the inspiration for Rick's Cafe in Casablanca.
Mm-hmm.
Like the level of realism in this thing for such a, it's kind of a light story in terms of, there's lots of darkness around. This is serious stuff, but in terms of, watching it, it's lightish, I guess. Like it has the film noir stuff, but it's really more at the end, and it's really more about the romance and figuring out if she's lying or if he's lying. That really is the big, because the characters are pretty much the same from beginning to end, other than, Rick kind of shows a soft spot, and like the two characters who evolve the most, I think, are Rick and Renaud.
But there's always a little bit of truth in every kind of lie, so you have to try to, they leave it a little bit up to you to decide which bits of it to decide. And I think as far as what you were saying about, finding light moments in the midst of all this darkness, it's kind of the way it is when there is something awful going on, and how you cope. And I mean, I don't. When you just said that, I thought, and it's not comparable by any stretch to a war, but the last blackout, big one we had about 14 years ago in New York City was a little scary because it was so quickly after 9/11, and it immediately thought, oh, now what? So 9/11 was scary, and so but we're all kind of just, well, all right, we'll sit out. It was hot. Sit outside. Everybody was. About that. And we're on the stoops and just kind of hanging out. You sort of just make a little party, because there's nothing else to do, and wait. And you just, that's it. Deal with it. Everybody get their ice out and food and, just kind of did whatever. And so you have to in the midst of everything. And so Rick's was the epicenter of that. And yeah, there's nefarious things going on everywhere.
It's like the place that they're trying to pretend this is normal.
And black market, yeah, because
that's how you deal with such things. I mean, you have to care. What is it? The keep calm and carry on type of thing. Even though things are falling apart about you, you still feign some level of normalcy to be able to deal with all, because it's a lot. It's really a lot in more ways than one. So I think Rick's kind of keeps that level of sanity. Well, at least something is normal, as normal as it can be.
And then you've got your characters who are some, let's face it, they're going to be, I got to get mines. And some are going to be like more, up like Ferraris that like, hey, he's greedy, and not so cool. And there's some more nefarious than others, obviously. So it is what it is. And then I guess, yeah, maybe Rick and Reno get reborn, but really the truth is they both got to get out of Dodge. Well, and they can hang out because they both, not got some tarnish on them, so they, they'll go out and make some more havoc somewhere. I don't know.
There's some inference that they were going to that they were headed to free French territory.
Yeah,
Brazzaville.
Like that, like that's the idea. And I guess the two of them can figure out how to get there a little more easily, I'm guessing.
Well, Reno could
straightforward. You just get a ship out from Casablanca down the African coast, and then go inland from where would you land? Angola area, across neutral territory. And the idea of going to Congo is it's free French, but it's well out of the war. It's not involved in the war at all. It's not like West Africa,
right,
which was free French, but still it was on the Atlantic, so it was involved in the war. Congo is just
central.
No war going on there directly,
yeah.
So you can do all your scams, and there's not much law and order either, so you can get away with anything.
It also reminds me of an Apocalypse Now Redux, which is the 4-hour version. There is a scene at a French plantation, and I'm glad they didn't put it in the original movie. There's a bunch of things that are in the Redux cut that kind of ruin it, to be honest. But it's
horror.
Yeah, but it's this fantasy scene of these rich French people who are trying to live like there is not a war going on around them. And it's
such a nuisance, this thing.
Yeah, and they're in like denial and trying to have like fancy dinners and that kind of thing. And then what's his head character ends up sleeping with her, with one of them, and yeah, it just changes the entire movie. But there's a parallel to that kind of like, if you're in a situation where it's, like a lot of people in Puerto Rico have been dealing with no power for months and months and months, and that changes. There's one guy that comes into Southern Cross Cage Match, Lenny, who lives down there, and he had been updating us like every week, like still don't have power. Mm. And I think it's that same, like you're talking about during the blackout, and again, like the French fantasy scene in that, and in Rick's Cafe, all of these people get stuck in a parallel situation, and depending on who they are and what they have and who they know, that situation is going to be slightly different. But it's that parallel. It's let's get out some ice and have a party, or let's just hang out here and have dinner and watch the show and pretend that this is not horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the blackout's not as bad as what they were going through, but I mean, I think that's kind of what happened, with 9/11. I heard a good, interesting story the other day about how people should have learned from Katrina with Maria, but there's a reason why, and it's brown color skin.
Right.
Which, you know, so
I could have told you that.
Yeah.
Oh well, that's what the journalist was saying. So it's, you know, obvious to most everyone. So that's what's getting.
And Puerto Rico doesn't get any coverage
because
that was still Houston. Yeah,
they're brown people.
Right.
So you know, anyway, but it's you have to, and that's what lifted us up in Brooklyn was just the swell after, just the swell of love, you know, was just you know, you ride it, you do what you do it, and yeah, right. And I think that's what the story is whether you're keen on the love of Rick and Ilse, even though she leaves, spoiler.
Yes,
you know,
yes, sorry, spoiled the movie.
You know, and you know, Sasha loves Yvonne, you know, and he's a sweet guy, and Carl and all these other and I don't know. There's so many interesting little, you know, and the little Hungarian couple. He wins his money, they can go buy their visa, and all. It's all this little.
And I guess,
you know,
and in reading, the actress who played that role was like the stepdaughter of some huge.
Oh, that's right. She was a producer, or
no, he was like a studio head. He was somebody,
okay.
Like, I recognize the name right away. I don't know what it is, but again, and that little
Mm-hmm.
tiny part of the movie is really interesting, shows a bunch of stuff about character, and I guess had to be rewritten for the censors because the idea that pretty much he was exchanging sex for visas.
He enjoys women instead of he likes women, which kind of like I don't get it, but
because there was something also with a swear in it that, you know, it was like a hell of a or a damn, something like that. That they had to rewrite again, according to Wikipedia.
I kind of didn't even want Ugarte to get shot. I was like,
his character is so huge and so early.
Yes.
Because Peter Lorre is just so freaking weird. And again, another person from a background of that would be perfect in this. He's gone really fast.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, he's got the MacGuffin.
He's got like 2 minutes on screen, and he's gone. But and he is the linchpin for the entire plot.
You know, somehow, Rick, because you despise me so much, you're the only one I trust.
Yeah, I love all that. Like, I swear I've met that archetype. I've met the guy who knows that he's a smarmy, weaselly guy, and he lets everybody knows he knows. But he's still, look, it's just the way I am.
It's just like, what? So there's
Isn't that Kushner?
I'm sorry?
Yes! No, Stephen Miller.
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy that looks like, oh my goodness, that one.
Rick!
Help me, Rick.
Yes.
It's just...
that's my new ringtone.
And then Green Street.
God. With Rick! Oh, hello?
Joe, did you find anything about the fly swatting? Did Green Street come up with that on his? Because I love that.
Well, there was I think it was Roger Ebert was pointing out that a lot of the incredible detail was due to a producer that I can't remember which one it was, but that included demanding that there would be a parrot in the blue parrot, a live parrot. Like,
you had to have the bird.
Yeah, but can you imagine? But the thing is,
thing flying.
I don't know if it was the actor came up with the business, because the other thing, I never saw anybody else. Nobody else was swatting any flies.
No, but it was him doing it.
Oh, it was very specific.
It was the affect for him. I'm wondering for his character choice and this construct of, because that only, it had to be flies everywhere, but him. In his with the fez and the white suit and just I don't know, it just
and him coming across as like a mob boss.
Yeah, he's a gangster, but he's bothered by flies.
Well, no, it's not just that. It's very emblematic of dictators. You think of more recently Mobutu. He used to wear a leopard skin hat and have a fly thing just like that. It's very much dictator symbolism.
Yeah, it's just like this man, he probably goes out in the back and shoots someone in the head, and he's like, you're going to pop somebody a fly? It's like...
Haile Selassie had one as well.
Yeah, it's like one of those sort of like Really?
It's a great little character thing because he's really, again, he has not a tremendous amount of screen time, but he's a major linchpin in it.
Yeah,
and that's why like this thing is like a Jenga. Like you pull one character out, the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly.
But there's not, you could probably cut a couple things out of this, but it wouldn't have the same feel, like the whole Hungarian thing. But then it changes Renault, and and I have to say, Claude Rains. His height, everything about him was just perfect for that role. And also Humphrey Bogart was 2 inches shorter than his
Bergman, Ingrid,
and so he was on boxes.
And platform shoes because it's just that bless you. Which I mean, I guess. But
because you can't get that romantic, thing if you're you're looking up at her. Like,
I guess then they couldn't shoot it in an up angle because
he's not the hero. He's the
rock save you. Today.
I'm sorry?
Rock stars and supermodels today. Yeah, little rock stars with that. 6 blocks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now it's okay.
Lots of parallels, but it's so funny just to see that they had to.
It's
that. But so we're all recommending Casablanca, obviously. A great, again, any movie that can start this much conversation that started with us talking about it. What if it was shot in VR? You're sitting in bricks watching all this happen. I gotta say, if you're gonna come up with a 360,
that would be a
solid story to be
the place to go to. Yeah,
walk around in a bar because that way you got it. Everything's covered. It would be more about sound because you'd have to mix the music and the dialogue enough that you could experience it and move, through all that.
Should be like, can you hustle your way out with get an exit visa?
Well, yeah, it's like meet with everybody and try to get out of Casablanca.
Oh, it's easy. Just open up the lid of the piano. No problem.
Okay, exactly. And why would they search the piano? Like, how bad are you at searching that? You didn't notice the piano? Really?
I know.
I don't know. It's.
Granted, they weren't good at their job, I guess. But.
Oh, they probably just went and raided the bar. I mean, come on, they're French. What kind of wine they have.
Oh, and the final the final thing I wanted to touch on was when it's the battle of the songs. And,
La Marseillaise and the
bar band turns into a giant orchestra, and it's just so and again, another thing that in Wikipedia, somebody was on the set when they shot that, and they said because of the backgrounds of everybody that there were real tears coming down their faces that they were singing.
Wow.
Because and that is the magic of some stories is the subtext, is all the stuff that you don't know that makes something like a movie that's cool that we're still talking about 75 years later.
Just wanted to that scene, that was actually one of my favorites, and it had this like you said, the realism. I didn't where you're saying people are actually, tears are coming down their face. You could kind of feel that. You didn't even need to see it. And it kind of reminded me, although in a less authentic way, in The Sound of Music, when the Von Trapp family were about to leave and he
Edelweiss
from the theater, Edelweiss. Right. Mm-hmm. So that was like that kind of that pride, that Austrian pride, so it kind of was parallel for me to that.
Yeah. Yes. Now that's exactly. Yep. Completely. Like, I just got goosebumps when you mentioned that, Tachi. I'm like, yeah. It's just, you get the feels. Oh my goodness. And they close-upped on Yvonne, Madeleine LeBeau, who coincidentally was the last surviving major cast member to live.
She died 2 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like 96 or something.
So everyone in the film is dead?
I believe so. That's
all the cast is,
What about the parrot? Is the parrot dead?
The parrot is very dead.
They live a long time
is it no more?
Oh yeah, that's true. Well,
they can live up for.
I mean, maybe they had a 75-year-old parrot.
They do live like really long.
Yeah, like
but
100 years.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like that's my friend Jackie Cation does a whole thing about pets and how people are so sad when they die, and she's like, tortoise, get a tortoise.
There you go.
Ancestors.
It will bury you. It will bury you.
Exactly.
You get the tortoise. No. 85 pounds. Who gets the tortoise?
Ooh, yeah.
Scratching up the floor.
Good stuff.
All right, we'll be back next time and talk about another movie with lots of tangents. Thank you as always, Colleen, Tachi, and Matthew. See you next time.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.